When you study the home front realities of World War II long enough, you start to appreciate the level of ingenuity ordinary civilians were forced to develop. Water, the one resource people assumed would always be there, suddenly became unreliable in dozens of war-torn regions. Bombed pipelines, contamination, rationing, forced displacement and infrastructure collapse turned everyday life into a test of creativity and resilience. That's why the water hacks used by civilians during World War II are some of the most impressive survival solutions ever documented. Before we dive in, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to my Legacy of Survival channel so you never miss these deep dives into forgotten historical survival skills that still matter today. You're about to explore 8 water strategies that didn't come from laboratories or official manuals. These came from kitchens, fields, rubble, burned-out cities, refugee camps, and resistance hideouts. And what makes them valuable for us today is that every one of these methods still works. They're practical, they're historically grounded, and they remind us how much knowledge was created in the middle of desperation, not comfort. Let's get straight into the first one. The first method focuses on how civilians use layered sand charcoal filters when municipal systems collapsed. This was common from Warsaw to Manila. People filled buckets, old metal tins, even broken cisterns with alternating layers of cloth, sand, crushed charcoal, and sometimes pebbles. Water poured through these layers slowly emerged far cleaner, not fully purified, but dramatically safer than what came out of bomb-shaken wells. The essential idea was simple: trap sediment, reduce odour, absorb contaminants. For modern use, someone living through a long power outage or a disaster scenario can replicate the same system using a plastic barrel, a bag of charcoal from a store, and clean sand. It doesn't replace boiling, but it massively improves the starting water quality. The second method involves rain-catching setups improvised from roofing, broken metal sheets, or canvas. During raids or evacuations, families stretched out old coats, parachute cloth, or tent remnants to channel rainwater into tubs and jars. In London's East End, some families even ran gutters into coal scuttles after their water mains were damaged. These catchers didn't need to be elegant. They just needed an angle and a container. Someone today could use a tarp and 2 pieces of cord to replicate this in minutes. For preppers or anyone studying historical resilience, rainwater harvesting remains one of the simplest and most reliable fallback systems. The third method centres on snow and ice conversion, something widely used in Finland, northern Russia and the Alps. Civilians learned quickly that melting snow inefficiently wastes fuel, so they packed snow tightly into containers to increase density and heat transfer. Families also mixed a small amount of liquid water into snow to accelerate melting. This was not done casually. Fuel shortages made every flame precious. Knowing how much faster tightly packed snow melts can make a real difference today for anyone camping in winter conditions or dealing with an off-grid emergency. The principle still applies: maximize density and minimize wasted heat. The fourth method focuses on clay pot evaporation cooling, a technique used across North Africa during the war. Civilians placed unglazed clay pots inside larger clay containers filled with wet sand. As water evaporated from the outer pot, the inner pot's temperature dropped dramatically, keeping drinking water cool even during heat waves and supply disruptions. This wasn't luxury. It was a way to prevent bacterial growth. Modern off-grid enthusiasts still use this method, known as the Zier pot. All someone needs are 2 clay pots, sand, and a cloth cover. We civilians weren't reinventing science, they were applying ancient knowledge under modern pressure. The 5th method involves boiling water using improvised stoves built from scrap metal or rubble. In occupied territories, families who lost their stoves built small rocket-style burners from bricks, mortar chunks or metal cans. These designs concentrated heat, reduced fuel use, and allowed boiling in minutes. Many refugees used a single tin can punched with holes to create a draft, making a surprisingly efficient boiler. This matters for survivalists today because boiling remains the most reliable method of making water potable. If people in destroyed cities could do it with a few cans and twigs, anyone can replicate it in the field if needed. The 6th method focuses on storing water in sealed glass jars or reused alcohol bottles, a technique that kept countless households alive during occupation. With plastic non-existent, glass was the safest, most inert option available. Families boiled water, filled glass containers while still hot, and sealed them, creating a vacuum that preserved the liquid for weeks. This wasn't done in bulk. It was done gradually, 1 jar at a time, whenever fuel was available. The modern takeaway is straightforward long-term storage works best when the container doesn't leach and glass remains unbeatable for safety. The 7th method centers on using wells that were thought to be contaminated by warfare but could still be reclaimed. In Italy, Greece and parts of rural France, families lowered buckets filled with crushed limestone or ash into wells to neutralize acidity and settle sediments. This didn't solve chemical contamination, but it did make muddy, biologically active water safer to filter and boil. The key lesson for modern learners is that many water sources that look unusable can still be reclaimed with settling, cleaning, and post-treatment steps. It's about process, not panic. The 8th and final method covers how civilians use plant-based coagulants, most famously crushed seeds from moringa trees in Burma, India, and parts of Africa under wartime strain. When stirred into cloudy water, these seeds bind with suspended particles and pull them to the bottom, leaving clearer water on top. This wasn't magic. It was chemistry accessible to people without laboratories. Someone today could achieve the same result with powdered moringa, alum, or even certain types of ash in emergencies. It won't purify water entirely, but it drastically reduces turbidity and speeds up filtration. What ties all 8 of these methods together is the mindset behind them. WWII, civilians didn't wait for help. They adapted, tested ideas, and reused whatever was available. Their solutions weren't perfect, but they worked well enough to keep families alive under conditions most of us can barely imagine. If you value historical resilience, practical survival knowledge, or understanding how ordinary people endured the most chaotic decade of the 20th century, these water hacks deserve to be studied and remembered. If you found this guide valuable, make sure you subscribe to the Legacy of Survival channel, share the video with a fellow history enthusiast, and help keep this knowledge alive for the next generation of serious researchers and survivalists.